Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome to the show, Sensitive Souls, and my goodness, have we got a show for you today. It is going to go deep. And if you enjoy the depth of our resources, I'm going to make a very special invitation to you today to subscribe to our free newsletter, which gets sent out every full moon. Every month, our gorgeous team pulls together all the best, most nourishing gems of wisdom from our content and resources and brings them together for you in an email to help you harness the archetypal energy of the moon. Every bit of gold and magic from the month gets put into one place and sent directly to your inbox to help you heal yourself and learn to open to your gifts. If you would like to receive it, then all you have to do is head to nicolebarton.co.uk/subscribe. On The Secret Witch Show today, our guest is Adam Quiney. Adam is an executive leadership coach specialising in working with the smartest people in the room. A former software developer and attorney, Adam's learned the hard way about the costs that come from keeping your heart safe and chasing after external rewards to feel whole and complete. From love, Adam is connection, passion, presence, wit, and brilliance. From fear, he is awkward, robotic, apathetic, irrelevant, and arrogant. He's learned to embrace all these parts of himself and works with others to do the same in their own lives. Living with his beautiful wife and their dog in Victoria, he is a man on a mission to bring the world to a more inspired and fully expressed place. In today's episode, Adam and I explore how to harness plant medicine to create meaningful impact in the world. In particular, discussing the power of plants as ancient medicine, in whatever form they're worked with, whether herbal, psychedelic, or archetypally. We begin to understand how plant medicine can help us heal and step more deeply into the meaningful work we were born to do, and how we can integrate the journey with plant medicine to fully express our gifts. Let's dive in. Welcome, Adam. I am so glad to have you back on the show again. It's been a while. I was reflecting on this earlier. It's been a while since we last recorded our episode on how to own the gold of your soul, which is magical. But when we were chatting the other month about your plant medicine journey and you described it as bonkers, I was like, that sounds like a juicy conversation for us to have on the show. So I'm delighted to welcome you back to speak about what you've learned and integrated since your plant medicine healing.
I'm delighted to be back. Yeah, it has been a while.
Yeah, it has. I'm so excited for this conversation. And yeah, I was thinking about the sort of question to begin with, and we'll kind of flow from there. But I normally invite people to share their journey. But I know you've already shared a little bit about, and I suspect you're going to share it from a completely different perspective around the kind of plant medicine journey piece this time. But perhaps before we dive in, and I don't know, see how you feel and where you want to go, but I'd love to hear more about plant medicine in general from your experience. But like, what is it? What called you into that journey in that way? And yeah, some of our listeners may be familiar with plant medicine, some might not. So I think there's so much we can dive into in this. So yeah. I don't know if there was a clear question in that. No, I've just asked it that way, but
I can wing with it. I can take a swing. Yeah. And then you can interrupt me if I'm off piece.
Deal.
So There's like two threads for me. One is how I found my way in, and then the other is like, what is plant medicine? So let me, I think I'll start on the second one, and then I'll weave in the first to the best of my ability.
Excellent.
So the first thing that's helpful to know is, well, maybe I'll start here, is that like the whole purpose of plant medicine is to support us to heal. It's very simple, to support us to heal. But when we hear that, we think, yeah, but we already have medicine. We already have drugs and stuff to do that. And so to help people get a different kind of understanding here, we have to create a distinction. And the distinction would be between medicine and drug. And so in the West, we don't really have much in the way of medicine. We primarily have drugs. And what a drug does is it stabilizes us in some particular condition that we might find ourselves in, so that then we can take on the healing work without, falling off the cliff, for example. So like, if I've got severe anxiety, I've got runaway fear and thoughts in my head. And so I can take an anti-anxiety medication, which is a drug, and it kind of halts my anxiety, but it doesn't change any of the underlying state. It doesn't heal what's causing my anxiety. It just sort of temporarily halts it. So then I can, in theory, go and get help, and then I can blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense so far?
It does. And I love what you're speaking to there. Like my mind is like, this is like so my own love and passion. So I'm like, going all over the place. It's just like this piece around, it's almost like the symptoms aren't being cured is what I'm hearing. The symptoms are what's being kind of medicated with drugs, but there's a deeper underlying probably pattern that wants to be seen.
Exactly. So we could even go deeper into this if we want to look at it ontologically. Like, often anxiety is what happens when someone tries to use their mind to alleviate their fear. So they use their brain, they think about it. And what that does is, rather than experiencing their fear, they try to solve it and they think about it a bunch, which works in the short term because we disassociate. We don't feel our fear in our body anymore. We kind of experience it in our thoughts, and that feels good for a while because it lessens it. But then the fear doesn't have any way to resolve itself. The way our fear gets resolved is we confront it, we face it, we feel it. And so the more we use the tool of thinking about our fear, the greater we rely on the tool of thinking about our fear. And then that picks up, and you need more of the same painkiller to alleviate the same amount of pain. And then before you know it, you're having panic attacks, and you're just like, I'm frozen, I can't make any decisions. So the anxiety medication just sort of disconnects your thought from your fear. And then you're kind of in this nebulous limbo, which is blissful at first because you're like, oh my God, I don't have to feel anxious. This is incredible. I can live my life once again. But you're, again, just like the going into our thoughts to resolve our fear, you're not resolving your fear in any way. You're just disconnecting it. And so the fear keeps brewing. And so what happens is, we see people when they start to use drugs is they become more reliant on them. They need more of the same amount of drug to alleviate the same amount of pain. They use it more and more frequently. And so you end up with people that become like heavily dependent on this sort of stuff. And so that's the context of a drug. So now that I've distinguished that, I can talk about medicine. But before I do, anything you want to interject there?
No, I'm loving where this is going so far. It's bringing all sorts of threads in that I'll dive into later. Let's just let you settle in first.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. So a medicine would be something that supports us to do our own healing, as opposed to healing us, which is kind of how we want things to look in the West. Like, ideally, I want you to give me a pill that then magically heals my stuff. But healing is much more challenging than that, because to heal something, I have to confront the wound that got created in me that's been stored for all these years. And I have to like face it and feel it. Sort of if like you have a hot rock, a hot coal burning in the center of your chest, if you want to get rid of that, you're going to have to reach down with your hand. This is, of course, a metaphor. Otherwise, you'd be dead. Reach down with your metaphoric hand, grab that hot rock and feel the heat, and it's going to burn your hand. And then you have to set it down. And all of that's going to require some work. So plant medicines are using the wisdom of millennia of indigenous cultures that have studied this, that have been sort of like botanists in the forest because they didn't have YouTube or anything like that, and have studied the plants and learned how to work with them and to create medicines that allow us to do that kind of healing work. And so the miracle of a medicine as opposed to a drug is that as you use and work with a plant medicine, you heal yourself. you don't temporarily like pause the symptoms you're feeling. You actually heal the thing underneath that's leading to those symptoms. And the way that works is typically they do things like take our kind of unconscious mind offline so that we can turn into and face. I can go more into depth in this, but I'll give you just a really quick summary here. We can kind of turn and face the thing that we guard against looking at, that our ego protects us from confronting most of the time. And as you do that, then you can actually finally be with what you've been avoiding all your life. And then it's a very confronting moment. But once you can start to be with it, it can start to move on and start to complete itself. And so people often, if you go and research about plant medicines, people report miraculous results. And it is miraculous because what's happening is we are actually healing ourselves as opposed to just temporarily pausing the symptoms. Point made.
I absolutely love the clarity that you brought to that. That's like, I was just saying to you before we started talking about how I've been in the work of distilling my archetypal apothecary for like for like a year, and I feel like you've just taken all of the year's last piece of work and just summed it up in like a couple of sentences. So I'm loving everything you shared there. It's like the way that I describe that is almost like we've been kind of conditioned into seeking this quick fix, when the reality is we can heal ourselves, but the work of actually healing ourselves is like really actually quite challenging. So
yes.
It's so much of a relief to be able to kind of outsource our power for healing to other quick fixes.
Yes, totally.
I love.
And there's one other thing I want to add in there, which is that like the hardest part I think about genuine healing is that for a period of time, it feels like we're actually getting worse. Because we're moving into fate, like to being with the thing that we've been avoiding. And that period in my lineage of work, we call it the breakdown before the breakthrough. And we're like, it's not working. I need to go back. Everyone else seems happier because they're popping pills or doing whatever. And so that's the hardest moment, is like staying the course in the midst of that.
Yeah, I love that so much. We would call that a healing response, which I love that. There was something else that you said, I'm trying to remember now. I'm hoping it will pop back up. It's like so I feel like it's gone now, but I'm sure we'll come back to.
It'll come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it was the piece that you said about what I loved was you talking about and maybe we'll talk more broadly about plants as medicine, because there's obviously lots of different ways that plants are medicine. And just going back to talking about the archetypal apothecary, I see plants, and I don't know how this ties into any of your own journey, but plants as a queendom. If I was looking at the different queendoms of like minerals or animals or plants, for me it's about the reclamation of our sensitivity. So don't know how that ties in with what you're talking about, but obviously there's lots of different ways that we can work with plants. In there's herbs, there's the psychedelics, there's even the archetypes that we were just talking about. Working with plants as archetypes is like almost mirrors. But what I loved, and I think this differentiates possibly particularly with the psychedelics that we're talking to, I don't know, I guess mainly talking to in this episode, is the part that you said about switching the conscious mind offline. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's anything you want to particularly speak to there, or if you would like a particular question.
No, there's definitely something I want to speak to, which is, it's through a metaphor a little bit, which is most of us have had the experience where we like strained our muscle, or we pulled a muscle, or we hurt it. Like maybe I hurt my shoulder doing something, and that what happens is like the surrounding muscles, they do what's called guarding your range of motion. So they guard, they stop me from going beyond it, because they know that there's pain on the other side of that. Like, it sounds a bit weird to talk about our muscles this way, like they're their own unique individual, but they have an intelligence to them, just as I have an intelligence to me as a whole body. And so my muscles guard, as does my mind. Don't go there. It's going to hurt. It feels painful. And anyone that's had like a back spasm knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so the interesting thing is that the musculature will heal, but then our muscles for much, much, much longer will guard that range of motion. They'll stop us going there. And they've done these really interesting studies where they do nothing to alleviate pain. They don't inject someone with a painkiller, but what they do is they take their conscious mind offline. And in doing so, all of their range of motion comes back. So there's some level at which basically what we're talking about here is trauma. It's a response to the trauma of the pain that was caused when we injured ourselves. And the muscle, the body, our mind, all of it holds on and is like, don't go there. We know what happened last time we went there. Don't go there. And so while we're talking about our musculature here, what I think is fascinating is our ego works exactly the same way. So if there was like a moment in my past at some point, whether it's 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago or 50 years ago, there's a part of my ego that learned, hey, when you do this, this is the result. This is the impact, and it hurts on some level. So don't do that. And then my ego is guarding me against going in a particular place. And most of us have learned to relate to this quote unquote guarding as the way I am. Oh, I just don't do that. I'm just the sort of person that doesn't go to social events. Or my favorite, I'm just an introvert. I really want to do this thing where I go and speak in public, but I'm just an introvert, so I can't, blah, blah, blah. So we've learned to relate to ourselves as just the way I am. And then that guards our range of motion. The range of possibilities open to us as humans are stopped at that point. And so when we work with plant medicine, it's like that same thing where they take someone out of their conscious mind and they can move into their range of motion with their muscle. Plant medicine supports us to drop our personality, our ego, that kind of thing, so that we can lean into those areas that we have basically shut the door on unconsciously. We didn't realize we shut the door, it just happened. And then we can start to visit them. We can face the fear associated with them. And then we can really start to heal them. And then once you start to do that, on the other side, it's unbelievable what becomes available, because you're like, oh my God, I feel so free. I didn't realize I could feel this good. I didn't realize 50 years ago I started locking this away, so on and so forth. Yeah.
I love that so much, because again, I think there's similarities in both our work, where we're really working with peeling back the layers and seeing what is unconscious and making that conscious. I think that's
yes.
the work that we're in. But I love how I'm seeing, because I don't know a lot about psychedelics and medicine in that way. And I'm loving hearing that. It makes total sense to me what you've just said. And then I'm kind of like paralleling it against archetypal remedies and seeing how they're also doing a similar thing, but just in a slightly different way,
yes.
Which is magical. The other thing that was really magical, I know we talked about before, funnily, magically, I had kind of distilled the energetic as an archetypal remedy for this conversation. We were talking about how it was ayahuasca. Ayahuasca, I believe, also treats muscle pain, so it's quite magical that you then use that example as well. So I love that. I would love then to hear a bit more about your own journey and what you've kind of reclaimed with plant medicine, and I guess maybe even like what called you into journeying with plants in this way.
Yeah. So when I was young, like in my early mid-teens, I guess, I grew up here on the west coast of Canada. British Columbia is the name of the province I live in. We have fantastic marijuana. Our cannabis is incredible. It's kind of sunny yet always rainy. We grow very good weed. And so that was the kind of the first vice, or the first drug, or the first whatever you want to call it, that I picked up. And so drugs, I'm using that term intentionally because that's how I was relating to what I was doing, were like, I wasn't a stranger to them. I was like, I'd done mushrooms, a fair bit. Psilocybin is the chemical name for it, along with like a host of other things. Then I got into raves and I explored there and blah, 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 blah. And so the thing was, I approached all that stuff very irreverently. Like mostly what I was doing was getting fucked up and having fun hallucinations and stuff like that. And then I kind of got into my maybe mid-20s and thought, geez, I got to like make a living for myself. Like I actually have to do something in my life, because working at McDonald's sucks. And which it did. and so I knuckled down and got clean, I guess you could call it. Just basically got real and got serious, and primarily drank alcohol as my means of like getting myself to a different state, and ate food. That's kind of what I stuck with. And the other stuff I set aside, and which is a longer conversation. There's more I could speak to there, because those have been some things that I've been healing with my relationship to those things. But we could now fast forward. So through my 20s, I worked as a software developer, then a project manager. Then I went back to school to pursue studying law. And I worked as a lawyer very, very briefly, and then found my way into my current career, which is transformational coaching. And so I was doing this for probably 5 years. And then like what started to happen were a few things. Like one was that I thought, it'd be kind of, for whatever reason, I thought it might be interesting to just revisit like mushrooms and just see what would that be like from like this place that I stand in, where I've created a lot more reverence, much deeper relationship to spirit, all that sort of stuff. And then simultaneous to that, a friend of mine who I was spending a lot of time with at the time was like, hey, would you be interested in? And so I was like, yeah, perfect timing. That just came about. So that began like kind of my reintroduction. And as I did that work, we started to create some ceremony and some structure, some ritual around it to honor the plants, we would call that. But all of it done intuitively. I hadn't worked with anyone on this stuff. And then as that was happening, the other thing that was happening was I was starting to hear more about ayahuasca because it was starting to become more spoken about. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Sounds like there's a lot of pooing and vomiting. Weird. That was kind of the extent to it. And then, but like I would, in this lineage of work, we talk about how the plant calls to us over time. And so the way that was manifesting, if you want to step into that context with me, was that I would just hear more about it. And I would meet people at like events I was leading at, and they'd tell me, oh, I'm a shaman, I support people with ayahuasca. And I'd be like, oh, that's cool, I've heard more about that. And they're like, you should come do that with me. And my immediate thought usually would be like, definitely not. Your energy, your being feels very unclean. Unclean's kind of uncharitable, but like I don't feel the depth of your practice, so I'm not going to trust you in that way. But eventually what happened was a friend of mine that I used to train coaches with in the States reached out to me, and he said, hey, I'm not sure if you'd be interested in this kind of thing, but I'm going to this event in Costa Rica in December for a week. Maybe you'd like to come. And I didn't even know at all what it was. I just thought a week during the month I have off in December with my friend Brian in Costa Rica, that sounds amazing, I'm in. And so I said, yeah. And then I looked up what I was signing for, and it was like, oh, it's ayahuasca, like a week-long ceremony with ayahuasca at this beautiful, beautiful place. And so it was kind of beautiful because you could hold it through one context, which is just like, what a neat amount of coincidence. There's no meaning behind it. Or we could hold it like more of a spiritual context and be like, the plant reached out to me the best way it could, which it like a vine learning how to grow up towards a particular place.
I was literally just visualizing that as like the vine coming.
It's a very sophisticated plant, the way it moves. And so it was sort of like reaching its way to me. And like, okay, not through that shaman who seems weird. Okay, not just through internet. Okay, got it. Through Brian. Great. We'll connect with them that way. So that marks me finding my way. That was how I first ever started to work with ayahuasca. And I'll stop there to allow you to share anything you want to share, and then we can go wherever we go from here.
I was just one of the things that stood out to me was like how clearly you were able to hear the call to like from the plant. I think that's something that many people, because of the amount of kind of wounding and fear and things in the way, would possibly have to almost journey through like healing in order to be able to clearly hear that call as well.
Well, to be clear, I'd been doing healing for like 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like, oh, cool. Adam was just able to, I would say that the work I do with my coach and with my teachers is very, very healing. And so there was a lot of my own stuff to move out of the way. And I also want to say it didn't, I'm speaking about this stuff now in hindsight from where I stand, but in the moment I wasn't like, oh, interesting, the plant is calling to me. It was just like, wow, what a bunch of loonies going and shitting and vomiting in the forest. Huh. Interesting. And then next time I'd be a bit softer, and then next time a bit softer. Yeah.
It's a great example of how our soul calls us to most, as your word was, bonkers things.
Totally.
Yeah.
So where should we go from there?
Well, I think that's a good question. Is there something particular that you want to speak to in kind of the journey around like your experience with working with the plant medicine, or the kind of themes that came out, what it showed you, what it revealed to you, I guess would be helpful.
Yeah, well, I'll share like the first experience, because that's, I think, really valuable to share. So I went into it without much in the way of expectations, which was remarkable, because my default would be to like learn everything about it, read, study, make sure I'm prepared, and kind of just surrendered all of that, which was cool. And where I went and worked with ayahuasca first, I'd been working with a shaman locally who also worked with ayahuasca. But the first place I drank was at this place I was going to with my friend Brian, a place called Rhythmia, which I now work at. And Rhythmia is very big. It was basically created out of a dialogue with the medicine, meaning the founder continued to drink medicine and receive the guidance of the medicine, which was like, you're going to build this place. Here's how it's going to work. And they'd be like, where do I find it? The medicine would help guide him. So he did a lot of healing to build this. So it's beautifully created place that's purpose built towards supporting this medicine work. And it's also intended as a bridge between the East and the West, because many people, for the longest time, you could go and work with ayahuasca or iboga or any of these plant medicines. But the way you do that is you go into the jungle and you're on this uncomfortable bamboo mat and you're getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. And like it's uncomfortable. There's some suffering, maybe we could call it. And so people in that situation, some people will go do it, but a lot of people just won't get the medicine because it's a bridge too far. And so what Rhythmia was intended to provide is like this opportunity for those that aren't going to otherwise find their way to the medicine to find their way to the medicine. So it's a very beautiful thing. So I went down and they have a bunch of classes to support you learning, hey, here's what you can expect. Here's how the medicine's going to work. Here's how you can navigate with the medicine, blah, blah, blah. They have classes in between each night of ceremony so that you can integrate the work that you're doing. That's what I teach these days down there. And so I went down, and the founder's story is remarkable. Like he was this multimillionaire who'd like sold his company and was a total shithead. He'd like made tons and tons of money, and he was miserable and he hated himself. And then that manifested in the way he showed up in the world. So people that have no ability to love themselves have no ability to love other people. And so that's how they show up in the world, so just aggressive. He's the kind of guy that would be like hammered at 3 a.m, driving his Lamborghini down the highway at like 200 miles an hour, just like awful guy. And his journey with the plants completely changed him. He's a completely different person. So it's remarkable. And they share that story at the start. So I was like, all right, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. And like, he had some fantastical visuals that he got and stuff. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to get those visuals. And so the first night we go in, we sit down, we drink the medicine. All of us are scared, as everyone is, as I am every time we drink the medicine, because it's confronting facing ourselves. What am I going to see? What's going to happen to me? So we're all scared, drink the medicine, and then we lie down. And the order of business, if you like, is you drink the first cup after they've blessed the medicine. And there's usually about an hour and a half wait before they serve the second cup. And then after that, you can go up and drink as much medicine as you want. But that's the sort of starting. First cup, wait an hour and a half, second cup, and then whatever happens, happens. So I drank the first cup, and then I sat and nothing. And I kind of relaxed. They're like, just focus on your breath, see what shows up, just be relaxed. But nothing was happening. And I was kind of frustrated by that. And so then they call the second cup of medicine. I'm just going to fix my lighting here as we're talking. They call the second cup of medicine, and I go up and drink it, and nothing happens. And so at this point, I'm sitting on my mat, relaxed, peaceful, breathing, and people in the room are starting to like take off, if you like. So some people are laughing, some people are sort of moaning, some people are crying, some people are vomiting, some people are burping, just stuff's happening. And for me, nothing. And my calmness is almost to the point where not almost, it's to the point where I can hear the woman beside me who's in a dialogue with herself or with the medicine. And she's sort of saying like, why do I have to be in such discomfort? Like, what about him? He's all peaceful over there. So she's referring to me as like the model for like, why does and so I'm peaceful I'm relaxed, but inside what I'm feeling is like, this fucking sucks. Everyone is getting on a rocket ship to the moon and I'm getting left out. And like, at least if I was vomiting, something would be happening. At least I would feel something in my body, nothing. And so the night ends and the shaman like does their closing talk, which is always replete with wisdom. I hear none of it. And then they take shares from the room and I'm just like, oh, what a bunch of bullshit. Screw you guys. I'm very disappointed and struggling to be with my experience. And we walk out and, you know, the stars are beautiful. Costa Rica is very gorgeous. And my roommate, my partner, my friend who came down with me is like, look at the stars, Adam. And I'm like, yeah, fuck the stars. Let's go back to our casino. I want to go to sleep. And so in my mind, I conclude what's happened is like, oh, the medicine doesn't work, or I didn't get anything, or it's just like, that was one of those nights that's a dud, you know, didn't go off, a damp squib. And it takes me all of the next day, during the next day, I kind of find people to collude with me. Meaning I find other people who are like, yeah, it didn't really work. And I'm like, yeah, this sucks, doesn't it? And they're like, yeah, I'm really disappointed. So we're like in the same place with each other. But as I spend the rest of the day and keep sitting with this and considering it and thinking it takes a long while, but I start to like get to the awareness, like what if that was the medicine? Like, what if that experience was what she was bringing me? And we have 4 very simple tenets that we work with, that we invite people to work with under the medicine. And it's 4 questions. And the first question is, how is this experience right now making you feel? Bring us back to our feelings. 2, do you feel this way as other places in your life? Like, is it familiar for you? The answer is always yes. Pretty much always yes. You might not be able to see it, but it's pretty much always yes. 3, when do you first remember feeling this way? And then 4, who did you become as a result of this? Who did you learn to be in your life as a result of this feeling that happened when you were a child? And so for me, I can start to see like, well, how do I feel? Frustrated, alone, like I'm being left out. And I start to realize, oh my goodness, who I become is a man that can't enjoy a moment's peace. He can't enjoy any softness. He can't enjoy any relaxation because all he's doing is fixating on every experience that everyone else is getting except for him. He's constantly locked in comparison. And so that was the medicine. That was what she was bringing me. It's very subtle. And that is very hard to see because it's like a hand stuck to our face. You know, we can see through the outstretched fingers. It's too close to us. And so the medicine is slowly helping us peel that hand away from our face so that we can see it, so that we can move past it. And so that was kind of, I think that's a really great example. And many people have that and during their first ceremony, because it speaks to like how subtle this medicine can be, but also how potent it is. Like to get a hold of that and see it, oh my goodness, that started to open up things for me in beautiful ways.
I really love that. I love the fact that it was kind of like right there in front of your face, and
Yeah.
like so you just couldn't see it. And I kind of knew where you were going with that as you were talking. I was like, yeah, that it makes so much sense. Because that's, you know, that's our material for liberation. And
Yes.
yeah,
Well
I absolutely love that story. I feel like I would have been the complete opposite to you and been like really hysterical.
That can work too.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that. And it's just so perfectly it's the perfect example really of how we can't see our own shadow.
Yes, exactly.
And that's essentially what this medicine and any medicine really, true medicine, when, you know, as we defined at the beginning, is really, that's the offer of what's on offer when we work with medicine in that way. And just going back to the quick fixes again, we kind of so often like outsource that to as if like others are going to heal us, when really that is the work of like going into that frustration and being like, oh, actually if I'm feeling frustrated, there's medicine here.
Yes, totally. If I'm feeling probably anything, but like the thing I always try to remind myself and often support my clients with is like, anytime there's a feeling we don't want to feel, that represents a place where we don't have our freedom. That's a place where there's healing available. Because like children don't really have that. They just feel what they're feeling, and they're quite vocal about it. And so to the extent where it's like, I don't want to feel this way, and then, we usually follow like, that's just not who I am, or that's not productive, whatever the reason is that we've created to not want to feel that way. That's all fine and good. But actually what is healing is when we come to the point where we're like, I'm okay to feel this way. Or I'm willing to not feel okay, but I'm willing to feel this. And from there, we start to have some real freedom, because then the feeling can be felt and then it can move on. And then the next feeling will come. And that is a beautiful way to show up in life, because we can be in harmony with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I feel like there's something there around the courage that takes to go into that journey, because I think that's something that a lot of women who are listening to this will often feel resistance. Like they'll often feel this kind of deep pull into that deeper healing work, but there's so much fear that can come up as well. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that, because I'm sure, you tell your story in a really beautifully humorous way, but I'm sure there were some really like scary moments like, oh God, what am I doing?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. I'll start sort of speaking in generalities, and then I'll come back to my story. So like, what in my lineage of medicine, transformational coaching, we hold that like, there's the predictable life. That's everything in life that we currently have, plus everything in life that we don't yet have, but we can figure out how to get. So like, predictable would be like, yeah, I could figure out how to make twice as much money by working twice as many hours. I don't have to create any kind of breakthrough. There's nothing about that that's like impossible, other than I just got to shift my life around to make room for that extra twice as much work, but it's available. So that's what's predictable. What's possible is everything outside of that. And ironically, what we relate to as possible, we typically relate to as impossible. There's no way I can have that. That's possibility. And so anytime we're stepping into possibility, even the consideration of possibility, an equal and opposite amount of fear is going to show up, because possibility exists in the unknown. It exists beyond the rules we've created about who I am, how the world is, what's acceptable, what's not. And anytime you step into that area, the unknown, you're going to be afraid, because you're at risk, because you don't have control over everything. So I think it's very helpful to remind ourselves that like, anytime I'm feeling fear, it means that I'm facing some degree of possibility. There's some format of like, there's something that matters to me here. Whereas like going to buy food at McDonald's, there's no fear. There's no possibility either. It's just like, yeah, I'll just go there, I'll buy it, I'll eat it, stuff it in my face, problem solved.
I love what you shared there about like, it's almost like the fear is the sign that there is possibility.
Yes, totally. And it's like a necessary companion, because what we try to do is eliminate fear from showing up in our life. And what that does is eliminates possibility, which is why so many of us are living these predictable lives where it's fine, it's good, there's nothing wrong with them. But we're like, I feel like there's something more for me. And the reason we're not able to grab a hold of that is because we're actively keeping fear at bay. And so we can never let that possibility come through the door, because the light has to enter with its shadow. You can't have one or the other. They come together.
What I'm just thinking too is like how we talked about numbing right at the start. It's almost like actually the numbing is really us numbing our possibility rather than
yes.
It's like so ironic.
Yeah, both really. I mean, we do get to number. We don't want to step over that, but you're so right. Like the cost of doing so is that we never get to really embrace what's possible. And to be a fully expressed alive human is to live from our possibility rather than from our predictability. So having shared all that, for me, my fear often doesn't occur like, I'm really scared, or me quaking in the corner or anything like that. It occurs like me becoming super rational, very cynical. Here's why, like a lot of really good reasons and well thought, like a lawyer, a barrister for you you Brits. and so that is often how my fear shows up. And so as we're confronting these sort of things, for me, it's sort of like, well, here's why this isn't real. Here's why this doesn't matter. Here's a legal treatise on why not lean into this. Here's why these shaman are full of shit. Here's why you can't trust them. And it's all super well thought out and like hard to argue with.
I was going to say, it's a sneaky one, isn't it? It's like you don't even know that it's happening.
Yeah, you can kind of witness it. And the way fear gets us, the way it gets us is it pulls us into that box. So there's a box that's safe. And that box for me is called be in an argument about this. And so then what my fear is secretly trying to do is like, hey, Adam, try to argue with me to prove that these shaman are legit. And then I get into this mental legal battle in my head where it's like, well, you can't trust them because of this. And I'm like, but I can trust them because of this. And as all of that argument is going on in my mind, I'm not doing the thing that's scary. It looks like I'm dealing with my fear, but I'm actually inside of it. And so the real challenge there for me is, legal battle, set it aside, choose in.
I love that.
Right.
So it's like, again, a lot of the way that I work with archetypes is like distilling these. They have their own like set patterns of wounding behavior. So for me, that's like I don't know, let's call it archetypal silica. Silica's very like logical, wants to know exactly what's going on. Like silica is like, that's its personality. It's like, it's making arguments. It's like, no, you don't want to do that.
Yes.
So
I love silica.
Yeah. So I love the way that you like so clearly again named that kind of personality that shows up for you when you're in fear, the one that wants healing.
And I will share, like, there have been moments where I've felt abject terror in my healing journey. Like I was doing a bunch of work. Sexuality was always like a real challenge for me because I had a lot of stuff wrapped up in like sort of Me Too before Me Too. Like I'd witness men just be like boars, pigs, checking out women aggressively. And then my parents would kind of make fun of like, I just checked out that girl. And so and then I was very sensitive and I'd witness girls, because we were kids at this time, talking about like, oh, he's so shallow. And so I became very, very, very hyper vigilant about not being a shallow man and being a good man, to the point where like, I basically put a bullet through the head of my own sexuality so I could be what I thought I was supposed to be. But the truth is, like, there's a part in most, I don't want to really generalize to genders, but let's do it for the sake of this. And if it crosses any lines for anyone, we can have a conversation, because it's not probably my intention, whatever it lands like. But like a lot of men who inhabit a lot of the divine masculine, there's a part of us that's a hunter and is hungry. And when we see beautiful femininity, there's a part of us that's like, I want to bite out of that. Like it's important that we acknowledge that truth. And that doesn't mean you go and be aggressive on that person, but we also have to let that live inside of ourselves. And that's what I couldn't do. I killed that. And so working with the medicine, there was a period of about probably 6 months really, but it was like culminated in 2 sessions within a month, two nights of ceremony, 4 nights each. So I guess 8 ceremony nights anyhow, where I was really leaning into this and confronting this and facing this and healing this. And it was terrifying because all of those thoughts were coming to mind, like, oh my God, who are you going to become? What might you do in this space? What are like, you can't trust this part of you. All of that was there. And like having it come to the surface was like lifting the dam gates up from a river that's been dammed for 50 years. There's going to be a flood. And so whilst often my fear shows up very reasoned and flat and lawyer-like, there are times when it's like anything but, when it just was genuinely terrifying. And I got a lot of support that night so that I could move through what was showing up for me.
Yeah, it's a really great example again of, there's, we have all sorts of shadows and wounding. I sort of say like we're born this whole soul, and then we have these layers of wounded states that kind of that we've picked up from wounding in childhood. And I think you and I probably could have had a whole conversation that's even separate on that piece around the masculine and the reclamation of the masculine, because a lot of the work that I do is about teaching true feminine embodiment, which feels to me to be very much in alignment with what you're speaking to there. But I think there's a whole we could go for hours on that one.
It's our 3rd appearance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm just wondering where to go from here. So let me just feel into that. There was one thing that I did want to ask you about. Let me just see if I can find what I was thinking about before we journeyed into this. One of the things that's become clear from what you've said is this kind of real deep connection to spirit with the medicine. And I think one of the things that I've also read about, because I've actually got a book here, I don't know if you know it, by David Luke, called Other Worlds.
No.
He's coming on our podcast at some point, actually, but it's all about psychedelics, and it's magical. And I don't know if it's in there actually or somewhere else where I've heard about this kind of link between this kind of DMT piece. I don't know whether you've kind of dived into that. So I'm wondering if we can speak to that, because a lot of the women who are listening will be women who are sensitive, may or may not realize that they're also neurodivergent. And then there's, there's been this kind of link that I think Rick Strassman talked about in this, but in the biology of near-death and mystical experiences. He did some research that found that there's this it says, I was writing about it here, it says a short-acting and powerful plant-derived psychedelic chemical that is produced in the human brain is the DMT, which provides a sensitivity to spirit that's commonly found in people more with neurodivergence and sensitivity. So I'm just wondering if we can speak to any of that just briefly. People may or may not know whether they're neurodivergent, and for me it was something I found out about 2 years ago, and it just made a lot of sense. But like, yeah, this idea of DMT being the spirit molecule, I think would be good to speak to if you've got anything to share on that.
Sure. And I might not be the most I guess educated or like well-read on that topic, but I can share what I do know, which is, so yeah, DMT is referred to as the spirit molecule, and the brain has like as far as I recall, like a small amount of it, much of which is released as we die. It's quite interesting. Kind of leads to like near-death experiences, that kind of stuff. But typically, so DMT on its own, in ayahuasca, which is the plant medicine I work with, it's made of two components. It's a brew, and it's brewed using a particular leaf and the vine of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is the vine. The leaf has the DMT. DMT by itself, as I think you just shared, it is uptaken and moved through the system very, very quickly. So some people will take what's called 5-MeO DMT, which I believe is taken from a particular psychedelic toad or frog or something like that. And that experience is like, the way people describe it is like taking a rocket ship to the other side of the universe and then coming back in about 2 minutes. So it's
unless you're you, in which case you're just sitting there in bliss. Yeah,
just sitting there. This sucks. Everyone else is on this. Well said. But so like, it's a fast experience, because that's how quick DMT is like broken down by our body. And that's what it is. But some people say that can be very hard to integrate, because you just don't have much time to sit in it. You're kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? When the DMT of the leaves of that plant are brewed and mixed with the vine of ayahuasca has an MOAI, a monooxidase something, or some, I'll get the chemicals wrong, but an inhibitor. And what that does is it inhibits DMT's uptake in a particular fashion, which means it can sit in our stomach and slowly be absorbed by our body, which is what allows ayahuasca to work over this longer time span. Typically, a ceremony goes from about 5 o'clock in the evening to about 1 or 2 o'clock at night. And even then, you can still be feeling the medicine at the end of it. And often, as you work with ayahuasca, you become very present to the spirit.